Thank you both so much for taking time. I know how busy you are, so we're really grateful that you're coming to talk to Mumsnet users and answering their questions.
It's good to do it again. I think this is my third time
lucky, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I'm going to crack on because we've had lots of questions from our users. Keir, I want to start with one from user Eggs and Ham. And she says, you have an image of being a dull and boring politician, but those who know you say you're the opposite. The life and soul of the party, in fact.
This has obviously come from somebody who knows me.
Yeah, I mean, she must have some intel. She must have some intel. And she actually put a picture up on the website, which is from the Labour Party website, which showed you in your youth, and you definitely look like one of the cool kids. So what she wants to know is, she actually says she'd love you to win the next general election, but she thinks it's authentic politicians who win these days. And she says, I'd like to see more authenticity from you. Why do you think you are struggling to get the real you across?
Well, look, firstly, I find this whole discussion pretty tedious, to be honest, because most people know that the job of Prime Minister is a pretty serious job. And there aren't many people saying to me, what we need is a bit of a comedian. We actually had a comedian with Boris Johnson. It really didn't go very well. And then we had Liz Truss. I don't think it was a real laugh to crash the economy with that kamikaze budget. So, as I say, the whole thing is a pretty tedious discussion, but I'm not, I think it is a serious business to run the country. And there's a hell of a mess. They've crashed the economy. They're going to leave a complete mess, and people are desperate, I think, for some stability and someone who actually, understands where most people are coming from. I grew up, and my dad was a toolmaker, my mum was a nurse. I actually do know what it's like to struggle to pay, make ends meet and pay your bill. Our phone was cut off when we couldn't afford the bill. I think many people say I'd rather have someone who knows what it's like and is serious about putting it right and taking us forward than someone who's got brilliant one-liners. But I have got a few one-liners.
Well, we might have time at the end for that. We might have time at the end. Okay, well, look, we're talking about the economy, and obviously, as you'd imagine, it's a huge topic on Mumsnet. And user Delia Took a Tumble says, I'm a single working mother. I'm having to tell my children that it's going to be a very cold winter and to get used to wrapping up warm rather than using the heating. I've also told them that I can only afford a very small and cheap Christmas this year. I have not shared with them that we may lose our home. What are you going to do for us?
Well, firstly, it's an awful situation that Delia is in. And we're here in Thurrock, and you may have caught some of the discussion this morning with parents with their children downstairs, many of them mums. Exactly the same story, which is pretty well all of them scared to put the heating on. All of them worried about what they're going to do for Christmas. Many of them saying we're buying extra blankets. And we need to just take a step back. This is 2022, 12 years into a Tory government, and we're even having this discussion. And it breaks my heart because my parents, what kept them going in life was the sense that things were going to get better, that we wouldn't be going backwards. And here we are after 12 broken years going backwards under this government. So in terms of what we do in relation to it, we've got to stabilise the economy, we've got to grow the economy. And the three things I'd want to do in government straight away: stabilise and grow the economy, and do it in a way that recognises it's working people that actually grow the economy. It's not this idea that those at the top do it and somehow it trickles down for everybody else. Fix our public services.
Immediately, it's not, growing the economy takes time.
Yeah, well, two answers in relation to that. I know that, but the trouble we've had for the last 12 years is we've been in crisis management for 12 years. We haven't had anybody that says we've got to fix the medium and long-term problems. So we go round and round in circles. Same with the NHS. Every year a sticking plaster, never an actual plan. But in terms of what we do this year, we've got big discussion downstairs about this. We've got to keep the energy bills frozen, and we've got to make sure that the oil and gas companies who've made massive profits, which they didn't expect to make, pay their fair share for it, because otherwise we're sticking it on the never never. And whether it's Delia, whether it's the people downstairs, they will be paying for it in the long run.
Okay. And on that note, user Worky says, what are your thoughts on nationalising utilities such as gas and electric? These companies are making huge profits while everyday families can't afford enough for food. Nationalising would make the bills more affordable and potentially be better for the environment. What do you think about that?
I'm pragmatic about this. I don't have an ideological position of saying everything must be nationalised, nothing could be nationalised. Where it makes sense, I think we should do it. That's why I was really, really pleased that at our conference we could launch GB, Great British Energy, which is going to be a publicly owned utility, which will drive towards the change to renewables, because renewables are 9 times cheaper than oil and gas, and make sure that the benefits of that come to Britain. British power for the British people, if you like. But so I'm not ideological about it. In relation to the energy companies, Bulb is actually in public ownership, but Bulb hasn't been able to lower the prices for their customers. So I don't think this is quite the silver bullet that people think. But where we can do it, Great British Energy is a fantastic idea for a publicly owned company that, as I say, will drive us towards the place we need to be, which is renewables, so that we've got cheaper bills, more security. Putin can't put his foot on our throat as he's doing at the moment. Massive new jobs, and actually dealing with the climate crisis. We can do that. Great British Energy will be a publicly owned company under a Labour government.
Okay. So Bridget, childcare, obviously huge topic on Mumsnet. You've made some announcements, but they've been pretty marginal. I think people don't think they're quite going to solve their problem. So Jennifer Barclay says, what are you going to do to fix our broken childcare system? The cost of childcare is crippling for parents, forcing many women out of the workforce. Meanwhile, childcare workers, again, largely women, are not paid at a level that reflects the importance of their work. How will you fix?
Yeah, I mean, creating a modern childcare system would be a really important priority for me as Labour's Education Secretary if we're to win that next election. So we have set out the first step towards that, which is breakfast clubs for every primary school child in England. I think that is an important first step. I do recognise, however, there is still more that needs to be done, because right across the system, it's broken, it's fragmented. It doesn't provide particularly mothers with the options that they need so they can choose the jobs they want, the hours they want. But I think it has to be around the school day too, and that's what we're considering. So from the end of parental leave to the end of primary school, a modern childcare system that reflects the needs of parents right now. And I heard it, this morning downstairs, speaking to parents here. Costs are so high, and it means people are giving up jobs or cutting back, and that isn't right. And it is important that we make sure staff working in childcare, in early years, in early education, are properly supported for the work that they do. And that's why we're going to think very carefully about how we make that change, because we'll need to make sure we've got a brilliant workforce that could deliver any expansion that we might be able to consider around childcare.
Okay, so is the long-term plan to have a state-run early education system like many other European countries?
Well, I'm off to Estonia next week, actually, to look at how other countries are doing some of that, because I don't think we've got all the answers here, and I don't think we've got it right at the moment. We spend an awful lot of money as a country on a system that is still very expensive for parents, that doesn't provide staff working in that vital part of a vital industry, that vital part of our economy, with actually the proper pay and terms and conditions that they deserve. So that's got to be an important part of it too. But this is a real priority for me. I don't think you can talk about growing your economy unless you've got a real plan about how you provide parents with the support that they need around childcare.
Great, thank you. And moving on to the NHS. So Colouring Indoors says more and more maternity services around the country are being shown to be horrifically failing women and babies. Women with severe disabling endometriosis are being told the pain is in their heads. A woman will typically receive less pain medication for the same condition than a man. And thousands of women are suffering severe injuries with incontinence following childbirth, but are told that it's normal and to get on with it. What will Labour do to tackle these massive inequalities in healthcare provision for women?
I've heard some of these stories, and they're absolutely awful. Women talking through their experience, and it shouldn't be happening. I don't think we should be debating it. It shouldn't be happening, and it needs to change. And of course, we're hugely supportive of the NHS. My wife works in the NHS. My mum worked in the NHS. My sister worked in the NHS. So the NHS runs through me. We do need to reform the NHS. Of course, it needs the money it needs to survive. I often say the NHS is on its knees. It's actually flat on its face, is what anybody working in it says. But we also need to reform as we go forward, particularly in relation to these issues. And that's a matter of urgency, but also in relation to other issues. We've got to go down the path of preventative medicine. We've got to intercept diseases much, much earlier, so that they can be treated much, much earlier. So what we would say in relation to the NHS is, Labour created the NHS, we're champions of the NHS. It doesn't mean we're uncritical, and that's very, very important to say. Where there are problems, they've got to be fixed, and these problems have been going on for a very, very long time with severe consequences for women.
And do you agree there's an institutional inequality?
Yeah, I think these cases are such clear evidence of inequality that it would be, tone deaf not to recognise just how bad the situation is. So that has got to be changed. But the Tories have run the NHS into the ground, on almost every level, and we're already experiencing a winter crisis, early in the autumn, and things are going to get worse. And people are really fed up with this failure that's been going on for 12 years. One of the big drivers for a general election is people saying, for heaven's sake, I just want to say now, I don't want to go on with this anymore.
Mm-hmm. Bridget, you won't be surprised to know we've got 8 million users, but they're parents, but a lot of them are teachers. So obviously education is a huge thing. Fripp Enos says the Blunkett report seems to be proposing yet another huge change in education. And that work will obviously be passed on to teachers to solve and implement. How will you be expecting teachers to manage this extra workload?
I think, just to be clear, the work that David Blunkett has done for us is a really important piece of work. It will be part of the policy making that we'll be taking forward, but it's a report to us, not of us, so it doesn't all represent where we would want to get to on every area. I think particularly on the skills side, we've already set out that we would reform apprenticeships, that we bring together the work of government to drive that national mission to reskill and to upskill. We need to see big changes across the workforce. Where it comes to schools, I'm really conscious that schools and staff working in schools have been through an awful lot these last couple of years, but also they're under enormous pressure right now. So any change that we would consider making from government, I think we would have to do very carefully, working and listening to people working in schools, teachers and support staff, because given the fragility that there is right now, the funding pressures, the real pressure that staff are under, I wouldn't want to make that worse by, without taking the care and attention I think you should take from government in making sure that you get it right.
Okay, thank you. And lots of women on Mumsnet are concerned about the issue of sex and gender, particularly women's rights. So here's a question from Sospan Sarah, and she says, lots of women, including me, have been told that we are bigots because we've repeatedly raised concerns about child safeguarding in the context of gender identity services. But the Cass Review's interim report showed that we were right to be concerned, particularly with reference to the lack of evidence around the long-term consequences of puberty blockers. Can I please ask if you've read the report and how you would be guided by its recommendations to provide better safeguards for children?
No, I don't think we should refer to people in those terms for wanting to have a discussion about what is a very, very sensitive issue. This is about children's well-being. It's often about their mental health. And I do think, the Department for Education have been looking at some of these issues, particularly where it relates to schools. We're still waiting for guidance to come forward. And what I hear a lot of the time, particularly from head teachers, is that they are trying to navigate this area. They're trying to do what's best by the children that they're responsible for. They want to make sure that children are properly supported. It can be a difficult time, and the absence of that guidance does make it harder, I think, for schools and for school leaders to try and do what's right for children, making sure they've got the support that they need. I think that is really important.
And you've read the Cass report, both of you? You know what I'm talking about when I talk about the Cass Review?
I do, and I feel very strongly about that children shouldn't be making these very important decisions without consent of their parents. I say that as a matter of principle. I say it as a parent. We all know what it's like, with teenage children, and I feel very strongly about this. That this argument that children can make decisions without the consent of the parents is one I just don't agree with at all.
Okay, and user Lost the Pot says, I'm not anti-trans, and I believe that people should be able to live their lives in whichever gender they feel most comfortable. But I am pro-women's rights, and I believe in sex segregation in certain circumstances, toilets, hospitals, changing rooms, sports, etc. How will you uphold the right to have single-sex spaces while simultaneously proposing legislation that will allow any male human to gain legal recognition as female through statutory declaration?
I'm a big believer in safe spaces. When we first did our Mumsnet interview, I was Director of Public Prosecutions, and I spent 5 years working hard on issues involving women who'd been subjected to, and girls subjected to, sexual violence, and feel very, very strongly that there should be safe spaces, as provided for under the Equalities Act passed by a Labour government. And and let's be clear, for 99.9 whatever percent of women, it's all a matter of biology, and we all understand that. Labour Party's championed women's rights for a very, very long time. If you look at all the changes in the law that have brought us greater equality, they've got the Labour Party stamped all over them, and that is not only our past, it's our future. Obviously, there are some people who don't identify with the gender they're born into. I'm not going to just disrespect them and pretend they don't exist, and that's why we need to modernise the legislation that we've got. But that can be done respecting, safe spaces, etc., which are very, very important. That could be done at the same time as championing women's rights, and we absolutely need that now. If you look at, the government's crashed the economy, and guess what? Women are disproportionately impacted. So we need a Labour government coming in, not only to talk about what we have done, but to champion women's rights as we go forward.
So you believe that there's a way of making the legislation such that it can maintain safe spaces and give trans people what they need in terms of, recognising their gender and all?
Yeah, I do. And I think when it comes to sport, obviously that would be an area for sporting bodies. But I believe in integrity and fairness in sport, and that means that, biological women need to be, safeguarded in that environment as well. We should have a proper, open, decent, respectful discussion about this. Balances are going to have to be struck, of course they are.
Do you believe the Labour Party has allowed that discussion, though?
Well, I think that the Labour Party has had that discussion, is having that discussion. That's a very, very good thing. People should take a step back. I actually think there's a huge amount of agreement if we were able to step back. If you read again just the introduction to that question, and I think most people agree with almost every word of it.
Thank you. So a question about women in politics, really. The Biology Stupid says that given that we've had the Conservative Party's third female Prime Minister, until just a few days ago, is Labour in any position to criticise the Tories on female representation in Cabinet?
Well, look, let me be clear. It's a really good thing that we've had 3 female Prime Ministers. It's a really good thing we've got our first British Asian Prime Minister, and that was something I was able to say from the dispatch box on Wednesday. And I meant it because it means a lot. And yes, the Labour Party needs a woman Prime Minister and needs a woman leader. I'll be first to say that. Luckily, what we've got at the moment, happily, I've got really powerful, strong women in the shadow cabinet in very, very important roles, and they would be in those roles going into, if we were to win election, running the country, whether that's Angela Rayner as Deputy, whether it's Bridget Phillipson as Shadow Education Secretary, whether it's Yvette Cooper at Shadow Home Office, and Rachel Reeves, of course, Shadow Chancellor. So we do have powerful women, but, let me be clear, the Labour Party, needs to elect a woman leader, and we need a woman Prime Minister.
Okay, and Sally McHarry says on the same subject, why do you think it is that the Labour Party's never had a female leader? Is the Labour Party institutionally sexist?
No, if you look at the Labour Party, look at the Parliamentary Labour Party, just to take the obvious group in Parliament. We've got more women than men. Look at the shadow cabinet. We've got more women than men. Look at who we champion. We've done so much work on equality. And if the single most important issue at the moment, the economy, impacting women more than others, and this government has just crashed the economy. So if you want to look for which is the party that's sort of bearing down on women and actually holding them back, it's the government, because almost everything that they do, everything that they mess up, and they've absolutely damaged the economy, impacts women disproportionately. So that's amongst the very many reasons that we need to get rid of them and usher in a Labour government.
Okay. Just one on Brexit. Always is never going to go away. New York Christmas says, if, as Prime Minister, there was overwhelming evidence from recognised experts that Brexit had caused significant damage to the UK economy, would you consider re-entering the customs union and the single market?
I think that we've got to make Brexit work. And I think all that we've got at the moment is a government that's got us out of the EU with a deal that isn't working. And we've got to make Brexit work. That does not involve going back into the EU, does not involve going to the customs union or the single market, but it does mean removing the barriers that are there to those that want to trade. It does mean sorting out the protocol in Northern Ireland. We had a big Labour Creatives launch last night. It was fantastic with the creative sector. They want help, particularly travelling across borders in relation to their sector, which is absolutely huge. All of those things need to be fixed, but that doesn't involve going back into the EU. It does involve making Brexit work.
Okay. Glomerulus asks, I was pleased to see the clean energy plans at the party conference, but what does Labour plan to do about the climate impacts we're already facing and which will get worse in the future? Will you be willing to strengthen the Climate Change Act of 2008 to make sure that resilience to climate impacts is not just assessed, but actually done and properly financed?
Yes, we absolutely need to move forward on this. And what we did at our conference was to set out what we call our Green Prosperity Plan, which is a plan that does involve clean power by 2030, but that's a massive undertaking. I think it will be done. Lots of people said, Keir, it's difficult. I said, I know it's difficult, but is it possible to do it? And the answer is yes, with a government that has the intent to do it. So clean power by 2030. GB Energy, publicly owned company, driving this forward towards renewables. Renewables are 9 times cheaper than oil and gas. And our plan does, for the first time, a political party has been able to put forward a plan for the future that does 4 things. Firstly, it'll bring our bills down. And talking to the mums in particular downstairs who are struggling with their energy bills, they want to hear how those energy bills are going down. Second thing it does is to give us security so that we're not exposed to the international market in the same way, with Putin being able to, as I say, put his foot on our throats. Thirdly, huge generational change in relation to the jobs of the future. And fourthly, deals with climate change. So we've got this very, very powerful plan to go. It's the most bold plan that anybody's put on there, and it will put us ahead of many of our partners across the world. So the sooner we can get going on that, the better, because we've had years and years of delay. If you look at this government's failure, it's everywhere to be seen. They've not really tackled this. They've not gone for onshore wind. Insulating people's homes is hugely important. We were doing that a bit until Cameron said, cut the green crap. Then it all dropped down. And now people are still living in homes where they're paying energy bills. A lot of that's being lost. Shouldn't have been the case. We intend to do something about it.
Okay, thank you. So a question from I Love Luca. And this is a question.
Luca must be a child or a pet.
Yeah,
I'm
well, who knows? If Bridget was sitting here in your position as prospective leader of the country, she would definitely get asked this question. So she says, I'm asking this because I'm certain if you're a woman, he would be asked this question. Yet I can't recall having seen him be asked it. How do you balance the demands of your incredibly demanding job with those of having a young family? Do you actually get to see your kids? And does your wife end up picking up the strain? And if so, does she mind?
Well, the first thing is I should be asked that question, and quite right too. I'm very happy to answer it. I do try to get the balance right. It is difficult because it's a busy job, but it is about choices. And I make the choice to give up time for my children. I don't want in 10 years' time to do what so many men do, which is to say, oh, I wish I'd spent more time with my children. I really regret it. So, for example, just to give an example, I've got a hard stop in my diary at 6 o'clock on a Friday, unless it's exceptional. I will be going home. I will be with my wife. I will be with our kids. Equally, at the weekend, our kids do sport and all the usual things, and I try to take them to that. And but it's no good sort of not doing that. You've got to carve out that time. Now, true it is, on a Friday, we argue about what takeaway we might get, and everyone is trying to get the iPads off the kids. So, but I've got rules about this. I'm not going to be someone who in 10 years just says, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I'd spent more time with my kids. I love being with my kids. It's fantastic. Right. And it's really good for me as well, because they have no regard for the fact that I'm leader of the Labour Party. I walk through that front door and I'm dad, I'm their property, and that's absolutely right. So, they make fun of what I do for a living, which is good.
Yes. And it will be that way forever, I should think.
But my daughter, I'll just give you one small example of it, because it was absolutely brilliant. My daughter said to me, this was a couple of years ago now, she said, what are you doing tonight? I said, I'm doing a fundraising dinner. I said, what's that? I said, it's a dinner where people pay to come and hear somebody speak. She said, oh, well, who's speaking? I said, well, I am. She said, why would anyone pay to hear you speak? So it's a really good leveller.
Yeah, very good. And the forums of Mumsnet are littered with sort of women who are slightly disappointed in their husbands and how much they're doing their equal share. And clearly it must be very hard in your position. Have you got some sort of bargain where you say, I'll give me 10 years at this and I'll pick up the slack later?
No, we try to do as much as we can together now. Again, I genuinely think it's a mistake to sort of park it. In 10 years, I mean, our boy is 14 now, our little girl's 11.
Sort of domestic duties, putting the bins out.
Yeah, so I put the bins out.
They always put the bins out. The bins out is what they do.
I mean, yeah. Sometimes we have photographers outside our house.
Yeah.
Sort of struggle to get that
Okay,
out,
it wouldn't be a Mumsnet interview, really, if we didn't ask your favourite biscuit. So, Bridget, I'm going to kick off with you. What's your favourite biscuit and why?
Can I be honest? I don't actually like biscuits, but if I had to choose, I'd probably choose something with chocolate
Something
on.
with chocolate. Why don't you like biscuits?
I prefer sweets.
Okay.
I've got a really sweet
Haribo.
tooth, but Haribo every day of the week.
Great.
Chocolate digestive. And I think if you check your records,
You
I
said
think that's what I said
last
that.
time.
Have you asked me that every time I've done it? I think you have.
I think we do. We always
Yeah.
do. Okay,
But here
well, that's
and
great.
you've actually got them for us.
Yeah, we did know that. We
You did know that,
We
eh?
look back. We look back. Brilliant. Thank
Anticipatory.
you so much. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks
Fantastic.
for the time.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.